Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper reading. The articles to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and the timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. This news article is an editorial appearing on page number 8 and is in the context of the various shortcomings of the recently passed Transgenders Bill of 2018. Now, usually UPSC does not ask questions related to the pending bills, either in the mains or in the prelims, but in the light of decriminalization of Section 377 and the various rights which now accrue to the transgender people, it is important for us to know what this bill is actually about. The focus of this article basically is about the shortcomings which still remain in the new revised bill. Now, as far as the background of this bill is concerned, this bill was first originally introduced in the year 2016 with the main aim to create a third gender, that is the transgender, and subsequently providing these transgenders with various rights and creating various welfare schemes for them. The Standing Committee on Social Justice and Empowerment examined this bill and submitted its report with various recommendations. And finally, after 2 years, this bill was passed in the Lok Sabha day before yesterday. Let us see what this bill says and how is it different from the original version of the bill. The earlier draft of the bill did not meet the expectations of the stakeholders and were not adequately right-based. The biggest criticism was in relation to the original definition of what would constitute a transgender person. Therefore, the 2018 bill has removed the reference to neither male nor female formulation. Earlier, the bill used to define a transgender person as one who is neither fully male nor female, who is a combination of male or a female, and is neither female nor male. But this 2018 bill has removed this neither male nor female formulation because this violated the right to self-determined identity which the Supreme Court of India in 2014 case had granted to the transgender people. According to the new definition, a transgender person is the one whose gender does not match gender assigned at birth, including trans men, trans women, people having intersex variation, as well as genderqueers. A person with intersex variation is one who at birth shows variation in his or her primary sexual characteristics. The bill also includes all those people who designate themselves based on socio-cultural identity, like the hijras, the kinnars, etc. Now, as per the bill, a transgender person has to make an application to the district magistrate for a certificate of identity, and the district magistrate would give this certificate based on the recommendations of a district screening committee. Now, the idea of a district screening committee is very important to prevent the misuse of the transgender title, but such a process again goes against the principle of self-identification. That is to say, why would a transgender person need a certificate from some authority to claim that he is a transgender person in the first place? The new bill also says that if a transgender person who already has a certificate undergoes a sex change surgery, then no new certificate would be required, but the medical certificate requirement still remains. Such kind of requirements are basically again putting an external gatekeeping on the transgenders, which clearly goes against the main objective of the bill, which was to bring the transgender people into the mainstream society. The second concern is that the new bill has placed a bar on forcible separation from the families of these transgender people, especially for the transgender kids. That means now a transgender kid cannot be forcibly separated from his family except through a court order. Please remember that in the earlier bill, this provision was also available for the adults, but after the recommendation of the Committee on Social Justice and Empowerment, it was found that many times it is the family of the transgender people who are the main bearers of harassment and abuse. Therefore, a lot of transgender people feel the need to run away from their homes. So therefore, this provision is not mandatory for adults and is only for the transgender kids. Another concern is that the bill now criminalizes begging by making it an offense for someone who compels or entices a transgender person into seeking begging or alms. Now, the problem is that since begging itself is no longer seen as an offense, it would really hurt the livelihood of these transgender people who otherwise also do not have any kind of employment, and for a lot of them, begging is the last resort for their livelihoods. Further, the Supreme Court had given a directive that transgender community should be provided with reservation, but this bill unfortunately is silent on any provision of a backward class reservation for the transgender people. Further, the Standing Committee had raised concern about recognizing the civil rights of such transgender people, especially in the areas of marriage, divorce, and adoption, but again, the bill falls short on providing key civil rights to the transgender people. In the end, the author says that though the bill has a lot of welfare provisions for the transgender people, but a proper social legislation with time bound implementation will only help achieving the objectives of this bill. Now, based on our discussion, try solving this question. We will discuss the answer after 5 seconds. The question reads, with reference to Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Bill of 2018, which of the statement is correct? First, they have been provided with civil rights of marriage and adoption. This is incorrect. Second, seats would be reserved for them in employment in the government institution. This is also incorrect. In relation to both these provisions, the current bill remains silent, and rather both these points are the major shortcomings of the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Bill of 2018. Therefore, the right answer is D, neither one nor two. With this, let's move on to our next article. This news article appears on page number 1 and is in the context of Niti Aayog's Strategy for New India at 75. As a part of a syllabus under the prelim examination, it will come under Economic and Social Development, and in your mains, it will form a part of your GS paper 3 under the topic of issues related to Indian economy. Now, in the year 2018, in GS paper 3 only, a question has been directly asked on the principles followed by Niti Aayog. Thus, we can very well ascertain how important Niti Aayog's policies and strategy are from the perspective of our examination. So basically, the Niti Aayog unveiled a comprehensive national strategy called the Strategy for New India at 75. And under this strategy, it is defining very clear objectives for the year 2022 and 23. This is because in the year 2022, India will be completing 75 years of independence. Now, this document has identified various challenges which exist across 41 crucial sectors in our economy and has also suggested way forward or solutions for achieving the objectives faster, sustainable, and with the inclusive growth in mind. Now, as per the document, the current situation is that India is considered one of the fastest growing economy in the world. However, our economy faces certain structural constraints. Let us look at those constraints one by one. Now, the biggest structural constraint faced by India is that the share of manufacturing sector in India's GDP is very, very low as compared to the average in other low and middle income countries. Further, within manufacturing only, growth is high in sectors which are capital intensive, like the automobiles and the pharmaceuticals. Thus, other areas in the manufacturing sector which are labor intensive, in those areas the growth is very, very slow and stagnant. Now, why the share of manufacturing sector is low is because India is unable to capitalize on its inherent advantage of labor and skill cost. That is to say, though India has abundant labor and also has a cheap skill cost, yet it is not able to harness or capitalize this advantage. And due to this inability, it is not able to develop large-scale labor-intensive manufacturing. Now, one of the main reasons why this has not happened is because of the complex land and labor laws which exist in our country. Thus, according to Niti Aayog, there is a need to increase the pace of good quality jobs in our country so as to cater to the growing workforce. And to achieve that, we have to steadily accelerate our economy to achieve a GDP growth rate of 8% on an average during 2018 to 2023. Further, we also need to realize an annual growth rate of 9% by the year 2022 and 23. And if we are able to do so, we'll generate enough good quality jobs and will be able to cater to our workforce and provide prosperity for all. Now, since we know the major problem plaguing our Indian economy We will next look into some of the key recommendations given by the Niti Aayog. As far as the recommendations by the Niti Aayog is concerned, the first recommendation is related to investment, where the Niti Aayog has recommended that there should be an increase in the investment rate from the current 29% to 36% of our GDP by the year 2022. Further, the Niti Aayog says to enhance public investment in our country, we have to increase our tax GDP ratio to 22% of our GDP by the year 2022-23. Currently, India's tax GDP ratio of around 17% is half the average of the OECD countries and is another reason why there is a decreasing public investment in our country. Now, for the agricultural sector, emphasis should be laid to convert our farmers into agripreneurs. And this can be done by expanding e-national agricultural markets, also known as the e-NAMs, and by replacing the current Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee Act with Agricultural Produce and Livestock Marketing Act. What we also need is a strong push to zero budget national farming techniques, which would help to reduce costs, would increase farmers' income, as well as improve the land quality. Another thing which India needs to do is to codify its labor laws. Now, we know that a country enjoys a huge demographic dividend, but if we wish to capitalize on this demographic dividend, we must create a well-paying and high productive jobs. That is, we have to create quality jobs for the people. And we can only ensure maximum employment if the labor laws in our country are codified and a massive effort is done on the part of the government to upscale or increase the apprenticeships. Further, the document also says if the BharatNet program is completed in the year 2019, it would digitally connect almost 2.5 lakh gram panchayats in our country. And if these 2.5 lakh gram panchayats are being able to be connected digitally, this would help to deliver all government services at all three levels, that is the state, district and the gram panchayat level by the year 2022. Thus, the completion of the BharatNet program by the year 2019 is very essential. The document also says that it's imperative to efficiently implement the Ayushman Bharat scheme as well as establish 1,50,000 health and wellness centers across the country. Next, there is an urgent need to upgrade the quality of school education in our country, and this can be done by creating a new innovative ecosystem at the ground level by establishing at least 10,000 Atal Tinkering Labs by the year 2022. Lastly, the document says that we need to expand the scope of the Swachh Bharat mission and we need to cover initiatives for landfills, plastic waste and municipal waste management, etc. Now you have to understand that this document is almost running into 300 pages. We have tried and picked the most important recommendations given by the Niti Aayog, but again this is not exhaustive and there is a scope to include more recommendations. With this, let's try and solving a prelims question based on a discussion. Please solve this question by pausing the video. We will discuss the answer after 5 seconds. It is reading, which of the following are structural constraints faced by the Indian economy? First, high share of workforce in agriculture. This is correct. Almost 49% of our workforce is involved in the agricultural sector. Second, domination of capital intensive manufacturing unit. This is also right and is one of the reasons why the manufacturing sector in our country has not been able to take off, because the manufacturing sector is capital intensive rather when it should have been labor intensive. Third, low share of manufacturing sector in our GDP. This is right. And fourth, labor laws and policies. This is also correct. The labor laws in our country are very complex and are also not consolidated. Therefore, the right answer is D, 1, 2, 3 and 4. With this, let's move on to our next article. The next news article is an editorial appearing on page number 9 and is in the context of the increasing fragility of the Ganga Basin due to construction of more and more hydropower projects. This is more mains oriented and will form a part of GS paper 3 in the category of conservation. In the year 2015, under GS paper 3, A question was asked on the Namami Gange and the National Mission for Clean Ganga and how the river Ganga can be better preserved. Now, in this article, what the author is basically trying to say is that there has been a mushrooming of hydropower projects, especially at the source of the river Ganga, which is the Garhwal range in the Himalayas. Now, this Garhwal region is much narrower as compared to the other ranges of Himalaya. Further, this region is a source from where the various tributaries of the river Ganga originate. But unfortunately, this region also falls in the seismic zone 4 and 5 and is highly prone to landslides and land subsidence. Thus, in this light, the author will basically be talking about what are the impacts of hydropower projects on the river Ganga, especially the entire Ganga basin. And further, the author will also be talking about the various reports of committees which have time and again warned about the anthropogenic activities which are happening in these fragile zones. With respect to the impact of these hydropower projects on the fragile landscape of Ganga, the immediate impact is that due to these projects, there have been a loss of agriculture, drying up of water sources, as well as numerous landslips in these areas. As per the author, the dumping of muck also poses severe threats. For example, the muck dumping during the construction of the Alaknanda hydropower project was the reason what caused serious devastation in Srinagar during the 2013 flash floods. The third impact of hydropower projects is that these projects cause water diversion because the water is diverted into various tunnels, and this in turn dries the entire riverbed, eventually causing a severe distress to the aquatic life in those areas, and many a times the riverbed is no longer even wet in certain stretches. Now further, what happens, most of these hydropower projects store huge amounts of water, and during this storage much of the sediments and the silt settles in the bottom and is unable to flow downstream into the river. This causes reduction in the fertility, especially in the delta downstreams, and also destroys the self-purifying quality of the river Ganga because majority of its sediments and silt are unable to flow downstreams along with the water. Moving further, as per the author, almost 20 government committees and reports have warned about the anthropogenic activities which are being carried out in these fragile areas and therefore have recommended conservation of these areas for food and water security. Now, the Government of India has proposed a e-flow notification especially for the upper Ganga river basin. As per this notification, during the dry season, at least 20% of the monthly average flow has to be maintained, and during the monsoon, that is the rainy season, 30% of the monthly average flow has to be maintained. Now, as per the author, what is surprising is that the scientific recommendation with regards to the flow of a river, it is required that during the dry season, 50% of the monthly average flow should be maintained, and that too for the existing power projects. The notification also said that all those existing hydropower projects that do not meet the e-flow norms must comply within a period of 3 years. Thus, in conclusion, the author is highlighting that fact that due to such hydropower projects, only 80 km of a 2500 km long river has now uninterrupted flow. And unless we start to question these hydropower projects in these areas, we will not be able to save Ganga, which is considered as a lifeline for millions of people. As mentioned earlier, this article is more from a mains perspective. Please try and attempt this mains practice question. The question reads, how construction of hydropower projects along the Ganga basin are impacting government's goal of Clean Ganga mission. With this, let's move on to our next article. This next news article has been picked up from page number 7 and is talking about the successful launch of GSAT 7A satellite. Let us first understand this news article, then we will proceed to solving previous year questions. Now, yesterday only, the geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle F-11 carried ISRO's 39th communication satellite, namely GSAT 7A, and placed it into the geosynchronous transfer orbit by launching from the Satish Dhawan Space Center at Sriharikota. The GSAT 7A is a geostationary satellite which will provide communication capability to all the users in the KU band over the Indian region. Further, the GSAT 7A incorporates a chemical propulsion system, and this chemical propulsion system will provide the satellite with an operational mission life of minimum 8 years. Now, as far as the significance of GSAT 7A is concerned, the satellite would enhance the range of communication which is provided by our existing ground communication systems like the radars and the stations of the army as well as other communication satellites. Now, all the out of sight and remote areas which lack ground infrastructure or have weak signals will now be covered and will become part of the information system. Now, almost all the communication satellites launched by India offer capacity and enhance the range of communications for the armed forces, but the GSAT 7A has been built primarily for the Indian Air Force. This satellite would not only strengthen ground to air communication but would also aid in much more efficient and better air to air communication amongst the various aircrafts of the Indian Air Force. Lastly, the GSAT 7A will provide a major push to the drone operations in our country as it would help the forces to reduce their reliance on ground control systems and would further help our forces to take satellite control of the military unmanned aerial vehicles, also known as the UAVs. Another thing to be noted is that apart from GSAT 7A, the Indian Air Force would soon be getting the GSAT 7C in the coming few years. Now let us look at few details about the GSLV F-11. The GSLV F-11 is a fourth generation launch vehicle developed by ISRO and has 3 stages. The first stage consists of 4 liquid strap-ons and a solid rocket motor. The second stage is equipped with high thrust engine using a liquid fuel, and the third stage uses cryogenic fuel. With this, let us now discuss few previous year questions related to space technology. Now in the year 2016, a question was asked with reference to the AstroSat. We know AstroSat is India's first dedicated multi-wavelength space mission which was launched on a PSLV in the year 2015. The first statement, other than USA and Russia, India is the only country to have launched into a similar observatory into space is incorrect. Second, AstroSat is a 2000 kg satellite placed in an orbit at 1650 kilometers above the surface of the Earth is also incorrect. AstroSat weighs almost 1500 kgs and is located approximately 650 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Hence, the right answer to this question was D, neither 1 nor 2. Now, in the year 2018, 2 questions were asked from the area of space technology. This question is in reference with India's satellite launch vehicles. The first statement says, PSLVs launch the satellites useful for Earth resource monitoring, whereas GSLVs are designed mainly to launch communication satellites. Now this statement is right. PSLV usually delivers remote sensing satellites to the sun-synchronous polar orbits, whereas the GSLV on the other hand usually delivers the communication satellites into the geosynchronous orbit. Second, satellites launched by PSLV appear to remain permanently fixed in the same position in the sky. Now this statement is wrong. It is not the satellites launched by PSLV, but the satellites which are launched by GSLVs which appear to remain permanently fixed in the sky. Third, GSLV Mk3 is a 4-stage launch vehicle with the first and the third stage using solid rocket motors, whereas the second and the fourth stage uses liquid rocket engines. This is also incorrect. GSLV Mk3 is not a 4-stage but a 3-staged launch vehicle developed by ISRO. Therefore, the right answer to this question was A, 1 only. The second question was with reference to the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. The first statement, IRNSS, has 3 satellites in geostationary and 4 satellites in geosynchronous orbit. This statement is correct. Second, IRNSS covers entire India and about 5500 square kilometers beyond its border. This is incorrect. Though the navigation system covers entire India, but it covers only 1500 kilometers beyond its boundary. Third, India will have its own satellite navigation system with full global coverage by middle of 2019. This is again incorrect. Though there are plans to extend this navigation system to the SAARC region, but it is not by 2019. Therefore, the right answer to this also was A, 1 only. Now, as far as mains were concerned, in the year 2016, in your GS paper 3, a direct question regarding India's achievement in the field of space science and technology was asked. In the year 2017, again under paper 3, questions related to Chandrayaan Mars Orbiter mission as well as why India is unable to venture into manned space mission was asked. And in the year 2015, in your GS paper 3, a question regarding GPS and the advantages of the IRNSS program was even asked. Based on our discussion, we will now look at prelims practice question. Here is a prelims practice question. Please pause the video and solve it. We will discuss the answer after 5 seconds. The question is with reference to the GSAT 7A satellites. The first statement, it has been launched to enhance the communication capabilities of the Indian Air Force. This statement is right. Second, it will cater to the users in Ka band frequency. This is incorrect. It is basically for the Ku band and not the Ka band. Therefore, the right answer is A, 1 only. With this, let's move on to our next article. Now, this article has been picked up from page number 1 and is talking about President's rule in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which begins from today. In your UPSC syllabus, it will form a part of Polity and Constitution, both in the prelims as well as your GS paper 2 in the mains. Now let us here talk about how the events have unfolded in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. We will keep the politics out of it and will strictly discuss just the facts. Now we know that BJP and PDP were running a coalition government in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now however, on June 20th this year, the BJP withdrew its support from the coalition government and hence the state legislature was left under suspension as per the section 92 of the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution. Section 92 of the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution is related to the provisions in case of failure of constitutional machinery in the state. So thus from June 20th, governor's rule was applicable in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now please bear in mind that all this while the state was under suspension and was not dissolved. But on 21st November, the governor dissolved the state assembly, citing issues of horse trading and lack of stability to form a government. Now, as per section 92 of the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution, a minimum 6-month governor rule is compulsory before the imposition of the president's rule under Article 356 of the Indian Constitution. And this is how the state of Jammu and Kashmir is different from the other states. For the other states, there is no requirement of a 6-month governor rule, but for Jammu and Kashmir, there is a requirement of a compulsory 6-month governor rule. Now today, on 20th December, 6 months of governor's rule have passed. That is, from June 20th to 20th December, 6 months have been completed. That is, 6 months have been expired and now the president's rule has been imposed in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, bear in mind that the election to the state assembly has to be held within the expiry of 6-month period of the president's rule, and if this does not happen, then the president's rule will be extended by another 6 months. Having discussed the scenario in Jammu and Kashmir, let us now very briefly look into Article 356, that is the state emergency. Now Article 356 talks about state emergency or president's rule when there is a failure of constitutional machinery in the state. Now Article 356 says the president, on a receipt of a report by the governor or otherwise. The word otherwise here is very important. It suggests discretion on the part of the president. So please remember, even if there is no report by the governor, then also the president can impose state emergency. So if the president on the governor's report or otherwise is satisfied that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried out in accordance with the constitutional provisions, then in that situation, the president may impose state emergency or president's rule. The president can assume to himself, firstly, all or any function of the state. Secondly, the president can also assume all or any power of the governor of that state. Thirdly, the president can declare that the powers of the state legislature will now be exercised by the Parliament of our country. And fourthly, the President can suspend either partly or wholly any provision in our constitution related to any body or authority in that state. But please make a note that the President cannot assume onto himself the powers of the High Court of that particular state. Moving further, as far as the approval of such emergency is concerned, and every such proclamation needs to be approved by each house of the Parliament within a period of 2 months from the date of such proclamation, and the approval can be done through by a means of simple majority. Now let's try and understand the tenure of a state emergency. We have just now seen after the proclamation, within a period of 2 months, approval from both the House of the Parliament is required. After this approval, the emergency will be in force for a period of 6 months. And this life of proclamation can be extended for another 6 months if both the houses approve it again through a way of simple majority. So thus, after the lapse of first 6 months, the proclamation again would be tabled in front of the Parliament, and if the Parliament approves it, then it will be applicable for another 6 months. Also, the maximum time for which a state emergency can be imposed is 3 years. But now here is the catch. The 44th Constitutional Amendment Act had stated that if a state emergency has to be carried beyond the period of 1 year, then there is a requirement to fulfill 2 conditions. The first is proclamation of emergency under Article 352. Article 352 talks about national emergency. So if there is a proclamation of national emergency which is operational either in the whole part of India or in that concerned part of the state, then that would become the first condition. And the second condition is that if the Election Commission of India certifies that the continuation of emergency under 356 is very necessary on the account of holding elections in that concerned state legislative assembly. So this is how the tenure of a state emergency proceeds. As far as the effect of president's rule in a state is concerned, when a president's rule is imposed, the state legislature either ceases to function because it can either be suspended or it can be completely dissolved. This again would depend upon the discretion of the president. Next, let's move on to discuss the previous year questions. Now this first question was asked in the prelims 2014 and is asking which of the following are discretionary powers given to the governor of a state. The first is sending report to the President of India for imposing a president's rule. This is right. Second, appointment of ministers. This is incorrect. Third, reserving certain bills passed by the state legislature for consideration of the President of India. This is right. Making the rules to conduct the business of the state government is also incorrect. Hence, the right answer to this question was B, 1 and 3. Further, in the year 2017, a question asked which of the following are not necessarily the consequences of proclamation of the president's rule in a state. The right answer to this was B, 1 and 3 only. First, the dissolution of the state legislative assembly is correct because it is not necessary that as soon as a president's rule is imposed, the state legislative assembly would be dissolved. Second, removal of the council of ministers in the state. Now this is incorrect because as soon as president's rule is imposed, the powers which existed with the state legislature are assumed by the parliament. And the third, dissolution of the local bodies. This option is right because again, the president may suspend the local body in that state or he may also not suspend. And very recently, the 2018 paper asked if the President of India exercises his power as provided under Article 356, which is the state emergency, then what would be the consequence? The right answer to this is B. The powers of the legislature of that state shall be exercised under the authority of Parliament. Now, based on our discussion, try solving this prelims practice question. We will discuss the answer after 5 seconds. The question is in reference to the President's rule under Article 356. The first statement, President can assume powers of all state bodies, including the High Court, is incorrect. Second, Governor's report is mandatory before President can proclaim state emergency. This too is incorrect. The President can impose state emergency based on his discretion. Hence, the right answer is D, neither 1 nor 2. Now, after going through articles in detail, let us now look at some of the news snippets which are important from the prelims perspective. You can find the headlines of these news snippets on the daily news headline which is available on the Rao's IAS website. Now, the first news snippet we'll be looking at is the Commercial Surrogacy Bill, which has been passed in the Lok Sabha. Now, as per the bill, commercial surrogacy has been banned in India, and now surrogacy will only be allowed for altruistic purposes. That is to say, in altruistic surrogacy, no compensation, especially monetary compensation, will be paid to the surrogate mother, and only her medical expenses and insurance claims will be taken care of. Further, as per the bill, only close Indian relatives can be surrogate mothers, and that too again for purely altruistic reasons. The bill also provides for a penal provision in case of violation of these rules and provides a jail term of 10 years, and the court can also impose a fine of 10 lakh rupees. From your UPSC perspective, it will form a part of your social issues. The next snippet is your editorial, Befriend Thy Neighbour. In this article, the author is recommending that Indian institutions should collaborate in academic research with the Chinese institution. Now, as the author is saying that India should collaborate with China, especially in the field of academic research, because this would help India. Firstly, India would then be able to bypass its reliance on Western institutions to improve our own research and development. Secondly, collaborating with China would help to ensure a sustainable environment for the development. Further, the author also suggests that Indian institutions like JNU, IIT, etc. can link and pair with Chinese institutions like the Peking University. Lastly, the author says it's very important to move beyond the Western lack of understanding of China, and rather it's high time that India should develop its own understanding of China. As far as syllabus is concerned, it is more mains oriented and will form a part of GS paper 2 in the category of international relationships, specifically neighborhood relationships. The next snippet appears on page number 14, which talks about the mandatory packaging of food grains in jute bags. Now, the center has mandated that 100% of food grains as well as 20% of sugar has to compulsorily be packed in a jute packaging. This is in line with the Jute Packaging Material Act of 1987, which had made jute packaging mandatory in order to support the raw jute market and to also protect it from the plastic packaging market. As far as the states are concerned, the state of Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal are the largest producers of raw jute, whereas the state of Punjab is the largest procuring states. Now, jute industry is very important because it employs almost 3.7 lakh mill workers. From the perspective of examination, it can form an important part of your GS paper 3 in the category of agricultural economy, and you can use this point in order to highlight the steps taken by the government to support the jute industry in our country. This snippet has been taken from page number 5 and is in the reference to the recently carried out excavations at the Pampa Basin. Now, the river Pampa is located in the state of Kerala and is the third largest river. Importantly, the temple of Sabrimala is located on this Pampa river. This Pampa river was also the home of ancient Pampa civilization. Now, the reason this Pampa basin has been in news because recently the archaeological department has excavated terracotta figurines from the areas around this river. The Pampa river can be important from your prelims perspective, especially in the topic of geography. With this, we come to an end for today's discussion. Let's move on to the question of the day.